Eliza was a young girl who nearly sacrificed everything to save her brothers. I must tell you this story, for it is too touching not to be shared. The Wild Swans. Far, far away, in a land where the swallows go to escape the cold of winter, lived a king with 11 sons and 1 daughter. Her name was Eliza. The 11 sons, being princes, went to school with decorations on their chests and sabers at their sides. They wrote on slates of gold with diamond pencils and learned everything very easily, whether by heart or by logic. One could easily see they were princes. Their sister, Eliza, sat on a little crystal stool and had a book of pictures that had cost nearly half the kingdom. Ah, how the children were happy, but it couldn't last forever. Their father, widowed for some years, got remarried to an evil queen who hated the children. The queen quickly made the poor king believe all manner of horrible things about the princes, so that he stopped caring about them at all. "Fly away into the world and fend for yourselves," said the evil queen to the princes. "Fly like birds, but stay silent." She could not, however, cast as terrible a curse on them as she would have liked. So they were transformed into 11 magnificent wild swans. With a strange cry, they flew out the windows of the castle towards the fields and the forest. When Eliza was 15 years old, she became very beautiful. The evil queen couldn't contain her hatred and her envy of the young princess. She made certain that the king himself wanted to reject his once beloved daughter. One day, wearied by the hatred of her stepmother, Eliza slipped out of the castle and walked all day through the fields and marshes towards the forest. She decided to look for her brothers until she found them. She had just entered the forest when night fell. After having spent the night in the forest, Eliza was lost. She saw an old woman carrying a basket of juniper berries and thought maybe she could help her. "Have you seen 11 princes riding through the forest?" Eliza asked the old woman. "No," said the crone. "But yesterday I did see 11 swans wearing gold crowns swimming in the river very close by." Eliza thanked the old woman gratefully and walked all along the river. As night began to fall, Eliza saw 11 wild swans with gold crowns on their heads. They flew down towards the ground one after the other, looking like a long white ribbon through the air. The young girl hid behind a bush while the swans landed and folded their big white wings. She watched as their feathers fell the instant the sun's last beams disappeared from the water, and 11 charming princes appeared, her brothers. The curse of her evil stepmother made Eliza's brothers change into swans from sunrise to sunset. Ah, how Eliza wanted to free her brothers from the dreadful curse. One night, Eliza dreamed that she met a fairy who told her how to save her brothers. But it was not simple. First, she had to pick stinging nettles from a cemetery and use them to knit a coat of mail for each of her brothers. And from the moment she picked the first nettle until the moment all her brothers wore the mail coats, she could not utter a single word. If she did, her brothers would fall down dead. It would be an awful ordeal, one demanding all of her strength, but it was the only way to rid her brothers of the evil spell. Eliza wanted to save her brothers more than anything. No obstacle was too great for her to overcome. She decided to hide in a grotto, far from curious eyes, in order to dedicate herself to her work. She rarely left her hiding place, and only to pick the stinging nettles from the cemetery where evil spirits lived. One day, Eliza was coming back to her grotto with her arms full of stinging nettles when the king of a neighboring country saw her. He instantly fell in love with her and decided to take her back to his kingdom to celebrate with a wedding. He didn't mind at all that she was completely mute and wouldn't stop knitting mail coats made of nettles. The king brought Eliza to his palace and even gave her a room for her work. He rejoiced to think of their happy marriage to come. Not everyone in the palace liked Eliza. The archbishop muttered into the king's ear that Eliza was a witch who had put a spell on him. The young girl continued to work feverishly on the mail coats for her brothers and needed to go again to the cemetery. This time, the archbishop spied on her nighttime wanderings. The next morning, he told the king that he had seen his fiancée in the cemetery. The following evening, the king himself followed Eliza. He could not accuse her of witchcraft because he loved her too much, but he said instead, "Let her be judged by the people." Eliza knew she was innocent. Thrown into a dark dungeon, she continued with her work, knowing she only had until morning to finish it. The next morning, she was brought to the executioner like a witch in front of all the good people. Even on the way to her death, Eliza continued to knit the last mail coat, silently saying a prayer. 10 of the coats were finished, laying at her feet, but the last was still missing a sleeve. The crowd began to jeer and mock her, when all of a sudden, a flock of swans appeared and alighted around Eliza. "It's a sign from heaven. She is innocent," murmured the crowd. As the executioner tried to take her hand to lead her to the block, she threw the mail coats onto the swans, and they were transformed back into handsome princes. The youngest still had one wing because she had not been able to finish the last sleeve. "Now I can speak," she said. "I am innocent." At that, she fainted and fell into the arms of her brothers, exhausted by the weight, the anguish, and the pain she had borne. "Yes, she is innocent," said the eldest brother, and he began to tell the whole story of what had happened to them. For the wedding of Eliza and the king, all the church bells began to ring, and birds came in great flocks to land all over the city. Their wedding procession was more beautiful than any that had been seen in living memory.